Today we've got Rob from Pillar. Super excited about this, Rob. Cullen and I have loved Pillar for many, many years. Probably, gosh, going on probably 20 years now, Cullen, right?
Yeah, yeah. 2005. I was looking back at it. Acquire the Fire, I think, in
Okay.
Minneapolis.
Oh,
Mason
okay.
and I
Yeah.
attended, and Mason and I
Okay.
actually knew of you, Rob. First, not because of Pillar, but because of a little TV show that you hosted.
That's right.
I don't know if you remember. It's called Mayhem,
Oh
and it
yeah.
was on Steel Roots. I don't
Yes.
know if you know this, Rob, but you on that show were insanely influential to Mason and I's
That's right.
musical tastes and our upbringing and this whole world of Christian alternative music. We owe a lot of that to you and being a part of that show.
That's awesome, man. Man, that's crazy to just think back to that. One of the guys that was the producer of that show, his name was Rudy, and
Okay.
Rudy, he just like within the last probably 6 months, I think, had reached out to me just to check in, see how I was doing, and uh, it's been a while since I've heard Mayhem. Like many memories come back.
Yeah.
Is it one of those things you almost like forgot that you did it?
Yeah, 100%. There was so many little things like that we did that because I think we went out there and recorded probably 5, 6 episodes at a time. You know, you go out there,
Oh, wow. Okay.
you just do a whole bunch of them, and then they
Yeah.
just air them as
Do you know how many episodes in total there are or were?
I don't know. I have no idea. I
Because
don't
I
remember how
remember,
many I was on.
right. Well, I remember watching Mayhem, and if I remember right, Mayhem would always air right before the Steel Roots Top 10 music video countdown.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I do remember actually the first time I'd ever seen Norma Jean was on Mayhem. I still remember
Okay.
Memphis Will Be Laid to Waste. I remember that music video coming up, and I was like, "What is this?" Obviously, I saw lots of other music videos, but yeah, I still distinctly remember watching Norma Jean, watching all those other kind of bands, and seeing them on
Frontline, I
Mayhem for the
remember,
first
was
time.
was just
Yeah.
out, and I was
Yep.
obsessed.
Yeah. Dude, that's awesome, man. I forgot all about that.
That's fun.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Great show. Great show. Well, thanks for being a part of our lives in that way. But obviously, we didn't bring you on to just talk about Mayhem. We want to talk about Pillar. So before we actually get into like your own personal history with Pillar, I'd love to just hear how you got into music in general. Like what inspired you to want to create music?
Um, I'll kind of start like a little memento style. I'll start with kind of a weird ending and then like back it up a little bit because in the middle of Pillar, like one of our original guitar players, he was such a dreamer, and I loved being around him because he'd be like, "Man, I could see us doing this, and I could see us doing this," and I used to say, "I feel like I'm living somebody else's dream," because I never wanted to be in a band. It was never on my radar. I always wanted to be a professional baseball player. I grew up playing baseball and worked really hard at it. During the winter, I would go out like 16. I would drive my car out in the snow up to the baseball field and go hit and throw in the snow and work out on my own. So I was more dedicated to that. But I played saxophone in high school, little town in western Kansas, and I played saxophone and got recognized during this season of my life, my senior year. I got recognized as uh, it was like an outstanding soloist award or something. And our high school band went, and I got a scholarship to go to play saxophone in college. Well, I was going to go play baseball. Well, in that year, in 1993, there was a strike. I graduated high school in 1993, and there was a baseball strike. And so the major leagues called up all the scrubs. That's what they call them, like all the scrubs.
Right.
So the coach of Colby Community College got called up to go play for the Montreal Expos, which are now the Washington Nationals, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the coach left, and so they brought in another guy, and it was just like, well, my time and hope for baseball is gone. But I had this music scholarship, so I started playing saxophone at this little JUCO in western Kansas. which many great people have gone to that college. And Mark Schultz was a great kind of Christian vocalist that came out of that community. Daniel Cormier, the UFC heavyweight champion.
What was the
He,
college?
Colby Community College in
Colby
Western
Community College.
Kansas.
Okay.
And
Gotcha.
so I went and was playing in the band. Got like a $500 scholarship or something to play in the band. And I remember pretty early on, like within the first couple of weeks, I met a friend. He played piano. He was an incredible musician, like from Chicago, had moved down there and grew up in the church. Like he could play every instrument, and he's playing like keys. He's like, "You play saxophone? You should come jam with me, man." It's like, what's that mean? Like I was this little white dude from the middle of nowhere, Kansas. Like I don't know what this means. And this dude was just a phenomenal keyboard player. Uh, and so he's playing all these jazz cuts. He's like, "Man, just play something. Just play. You don't even have to make sense. Just play." And so I started playing. Well, then he says, like, "Sing with me." He's like, "Sing. Can you sing this?" I was like, "Yeah, I can kind of sing a little bit." Well, I started singing, and our jazz director or the choir director of the jazz choir and the choir of that college was walking by. He's like, "Why aren't you in my choir?" I said, "Why aren't you giving me money?" And so he offered me a scholarship like right there. He said, "I'll pay for your books." I was like, "I'll be in your choir."
Dang,
So
that's awesome.
that's kind of how I got into singing. I don't know, I never thought of myself as a singer, but then it was during that time that my life like just completely reshaped. It was like I was the kid that was growing up reading the box scores of baseball, and
Right.
the newspaper, eating my cereal, reading scores, to I'm making cassettes of all these like John Coltrane and
Yeah.
all these old like saxophone players and Cannonball Adderley and like crazy old school jazz.
Dizzy
And
Gillespie and stuff.
yeah,
This is blowing my mind that you
so
were
it's like
a jazz guy growing up.
yeah.
That's
So I
Like
switched.
darn near classically trained.
Yeah.
No, I'm definitely not classically trained, but I got into it and started to appreciate it partly because these guys were showing me. They grew up, in an all-black church. I went home with them one time back to Chicago on a break, and it was amazing. They're like, "You got to come check this out." And they play for like 3 hours at church, and it was just music the whole time, and uh, phenomenal musicians. And I just became intrigued by these people that could do something so well. So when I got back, kind of after that first semester, and going home with these guys back to Chicago and seeing where they came from and why they were so passionate about music, we started a little jazz band called Nightshade. It was just like this. We drew this like crescent moon with sunglasses, and we went and played at all these little like American Legion banquets or the Awana clubs with the churches. They needed some background music, or we'd play in the student union during lunch. We just go set up and just play anywhere. And that's all we did, man. I just jammed and learned how to appreciate music. And during that time, I really started getting into um, a lot of vocal, like Boys to Men, like very vocal harmonies and understanding that style. But I grew up, so part of my history is I grew up, my parents were divorced, and in 1981, my parents divorced, and I grew up in Western Kansas, and my mom remarried a black man in Western Kansas, which was very, like, early on. That was kind of the transition to where biracial marriages were very not common.
Right.
And so there was a lot. I would be with my parent or at my dad's house. It would be like Conway Twitty in Alabama and country, and I'd go to my mom's house. It was like Earth, Wind, and Fire and Marvin Gaye. And so I was just exposed to a lot of different styles of music all throughout my life. And it wasn't until I got to college that I really appreciated kind of not just the artistry of it, but the craftsmanship, like how well people were. I just appreciate anybody that's good at anything. Like if you're good at juggling, I'll sit there and watch you and be like, "Man, that is amazing. You're very talented." I appreciate anybody that's talented in any craft. But when I got into this jazz combo and playing saxophone, and then they're like, "Oh, you can sing too," then it evolved into like a little bit more singing. We're like, "Hey, let's go out." I'd go to win the karaoke competitions and the community is like, man, I just made $200, pay for rent, just doing karaoke. That was awesome. So that's kind of how I got started into like the entry into music.
Right.
As far as Pillar, so I left Colby Community College and I went out to Kansas City area, and it was a pretty dark season of my life. It was, and I say dark, like I was very much drugs, alcohol, just party crazy. And it was the middle of the afternoon one day, and I came home and realized I was in a pretty bad spot and needed to clean my life up. So I did, kind of sobered up, called the Army recruiter a couple weeks later and said I need to change my life, and went off and joined the Army. And I was gone for a year. When I came back, I went back to Colby Community College to connect with some friends and moved in with my brother-in-law, who would become my brother-in-law. He wasn't married to my sister yet, but he played drums, and he had some friends that were in the graphic design department that played guitar that always talked about getting together to jam. They just needed somebody that could play bass and sing. And I'm not going to call myself a bass player because I'm not, but I can play one string with one finger at a time. So I fit the bill. And so we jammed, and I picked up a bass, and they said, "Oh, you can sing too? Awesome. You guys want to start a band?" And like literally that night, we're like, "Yeah, that sounds cool. Why not? Like, I'm nothing else to do. I'm out of the Army. I'm going to get ready to go back to school." So we started Pillar just in my brother-in-law's living room. And I think 2 weeks later, we had some friends over, and we played a couple cover songs and tried to write an original song. But we didn't get to play that one because the cops showed up on our doorstep. We got a disturbing the peace warning.
At least it was just a warning. That's good.
They were pretty cool about it because they realized like we weren't there drinking or anything. It was just it was a Christian Challenge.
Like, we're a Christian band.
Yeah, we went to Christian Challenge, and then we went back to our house, and it's kind of in a neighborhood, but we're jamming in the living room. He's like, tush, 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 knocks on the door, and he just looks through the screen door and just shaking his head like, "Guys, what are you doing?"
It must not have been that loud if you guys could have heard him knocking on the door.
Well, we saw him more than we heard him. He was just like, "No, guys." So that was kind of how we started in the early days.
Mm-hmm. So, you don't say anything about heavy music, and you don't say anything about kind of the hip hop influences. Where did that stuff come from? Because I mean, especially early on, Pillar had a lot of more of that hip hop influence than that it did later on in its kind of heyday, I would say.
Yeah. So, okay. So the evolution of that from that season on to kind of the next. Obviously, you guys have had Michael Wittig on the podcast. He came in and took us to a whole nother level because he was actually a bass player. Like, oh, you can play you have a 5-string bass and you can play all the strings.
You're basically Jaco Pastorius.
Yeah, you're amazing. And that story is crazy too, because I remember he was in another band. What was the name of the band? Mishap. He was in another local band. And we were kind of we knew of each other, just being out playing shows together. And I remember talking to him. It's like, "Yeah, man, we really need a bass player." And I'll never forget the day he showed up. He knocked on our door, and he's got his little khaki zip up jacket on. He's like, "You guys still looking for a bass player?" I was like, "Yeah, man." It's like, "Come on in. Let's get this going." And the influences for me, like I said, growing up, it was all over the place. But I was really into hip hop, rap, loved Tupac, and just that whole season of life was very much into hip hop. Hated rock. I hated it. I'd be like, "It sucks." Once I got out of high school, it was like the Metallica Black record came out, I think my junior year maybe. And that was just an iconic album. Like, those songs were great, but I never really got into rock. But then there was that season, like I said, I was kind of crazy. 311's Blue record came out during that time, and that changed a lot for me because like these dudes, like Nick Hexum is like the whitest dude you could ever meet, and they're doing this thing that like they're from Omaha, they're kind of from the Midwest. You didn't have to be cool to be from Cali or New York. It was like these guys are right around the same area as us, and they're playing stuff that I really liked. And so our guitar player, Travis Jenkins, that really helped start the band, was very much into 311. Like he probably knew all of their riffs better than the band. He just knew. That's how he learned how to play guitar. He just locked himself in a room and learned how to play every riff on their record. So early stuff had a lot of 311 influence. Obviously, there was a couple years before we started the Limp Bizkit came onto the scene, and Deftones and all those guys like, and that was just like it made this big wave there. I'll tell you this. I know you guys talk about influential records and stuff like that. I'm going to say this was an influential record to me, but there was a moment when I was in high school when Public Enemy did this thing with Anthrax, right?
So cool.
And I never forget going over to my buddy's house. He was feeding his dog. He had a boxer, and he was feeding it peanut butter. And just we're sitting there playing with the dog. He's like, dude, you got to check this out. And he puts the cassette in. It's like, turn it up, bring the noise. It's like freaking riffs and like rap. I was like, this is freaking awesome. And that was in like 91, 92 time frame.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
That was like before that was a thing.
Right.
That was the thing. Because Beastie Boys was one thing, but when Public Enemy and Anthrax did what they did, that started a whole new thing.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. We've talked about maybe like POD might have started that whole thing.
POD was on the back end. They were
technically like before all that stuff, but like I actually do think it was Anthrax and Public Enemy that really kicked it off.
They changed the game. That vibe that they had, like that started bands. They're like, yeah, man, let's go do this. And these kids went out in their garage and found a buddy that could rap and just started banging on things.
That's amazing.
So you mentioned like, you learn how to sing and everything, but there is like a certain kind of singing when it comes to like a hard rock kind of, alternative metal vibe. When did you realize, I can sing that in particular? Like I've got the voice for that kind of genre.
I don't know that it was basically like, just do it. I've always just been the person that like, if something needs to get done, I just figure it out. And I can't remember some of the early songs that we did because we played a lot of covers. When we first started, we were just trying to figure it out, man. And so we played a lot of, covers and listened to it. I was trying to move into like the Christian music. So I didn't know a lot of the bands that were out there. So we were listening to the Switchfoot, like Kim 6A and their very first record, and Legend of Chin, Plank Eye, some of the bands that were kind of influential at that time. Like this is cool. And then I learned there's this whole underground world of all of these Christian like rock bands and Doug Van Pelt with HM Magazine that's like really pushing this underground scene. And it was really cool to listen to some of those bands, but then to try to emulate it through the covers, right? You're trying to emulate. I've been to a lot of leadership conferences and stuff like that. And one of the greatest quotes I ever heard, Lee Cockrell's like, man, just steal it and make it your own. He quoted like Beethoven or Mozart or somebody. He said, the good artists borrow, great artists steal. He's like, just keep working on something until it evolves and becomes your own. And I had similar advice in my life before that. And so you're doing these covers and you kind of start coming into your own voice, so that when we started writing our own songs, you just do it. I don't, and then I learned the how to like scream and stuff like that. Like, cause over the course of our early records, which we won't talk about the very early stuff. But then we did like Original Superman was like kind of our first big indie record, and then we re-recorded most of that record and added a couple of new songs. And I just learned how to use my voice differently. And then the from Fireproof, there's a little bit more singing on that. And then Where Do We Go From Here record, it was way, way more melodic. Like we kind of reinvented ourselves onto that record with like Frontline being more like melodic,
Right.
rapping, or just rhythmic singing more than rapping, to where that pushed us now in out of that rap rock genre more into a melodic kind of just aggressive rock band.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. And I find that to be one of the more interesting things about Pillar is that I remember walking into my high school weight room and I heard a familiar song. And I was like, all right, I know kids don't listen to what I listen to. And I heard Bring Me Down blasting through the speakers. And I was like, who is playing this? I didn't know anyone outside of like the Christian music world of my friends that knew who Pillar was. And there's Pillar. So it is kind of this interesting thing where there was a lot of crossover, especially around Where Do We Go From Here? And it surprised me. And I know a lot of people that are still following Pillar because of that, which is such a cool thing to to probably have on your history, right?
It is pretty crazy, man. Like just to see how some of those songs still kind of stand up, 20 years later, and Bring Me Down is still, it's a good song, man. Like unbiased, like I'm this far removed from it now. Like I don't have anything to like promote about it. It's just a great song. I honestly had a minimal part in writing it, so I'll brag on the guys because they wrote the whole composition of it. But so I have 6 kids. All of them wrestle now. So
Nice.
and they're very like competitive wrestlers. So we're at like national tournaments, and my daughter's nationally ranked. Like we're in the sport, and we were at this tournament, and I heard Bring Me Down. And I happened to know the guy that was running the tournament. So I walked up and was like, hey, are you guys paying licensing on these songs? He's like, that's like, probably caught him off guard. Like, that's a weird question. I was like, listen to the song. He knew me. I don't live my life by going out and being like, hey, I used to be in a rock band.
Sure.
Most people have no idea. Like now, like it's just they find out and they're like, dude, I had no idea you were in a band. Like you used to be a big deal. I was like, it was a little deal, but it was a long time ago. And it was just funny to be in that environment, and all these kids are out there like warming up, and it's still kind of like that big anthem song. And it kind of fits in the wrestling world, right? You can't bring me down. Like that's the whole point of the sport, is to take somebody down. So
Right.
What point in Pillar did you feel like, oh, like this is a thing? I imagine maybe those like first couple albums were a little bit of a struggle. So at what point did it feel like, what was it, maybe like Frontline or Bring Me Down, that like that seemed to be where the tides were turning, where it's like, okay, this seems to be like a legitimate thing where people are coming to shows, they know our words. Like was it around that time that really felt like it was starting to change?
man, it's kind of a loaded question, because I was just talking to somebody about this today about, work-life balance. I'm like, it's not a thing. That's not like, it doesn't exist. It's rhythms, like, right? So life is about rhythms. There's no such thing as a perfect balance, especially with work-life balance. But there were these rhythms and seasons that the answer to that question was different for each season. And there was like these, Seth Godin has a book called The Dip. And it talks about everything goes up, and then there's a season where it kind of starts to fall, but then you gain momentum out of that fall, and you learn, and then you grow, and you go higher than you were before. And then it was like that's what was happening with us. So I could probably rattle off like 10 to 15 of those type of moments that early on it was like we moved into a new house and we all lived together. So now we were writing songs at like 2:00 in the morning next to a super old lady that was deaf, so we could play as loud as we wanted to. and she was the sweetest lady. We took care of her, but 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, guitar player would have an idea. We'd go down and jam, and we would write a song. We're like, dude, this is freaking awesome, right? And we would record it with like a microphone in a trash can with a cassette recorder, so we could try to capture as much sound. And we're like, check this out, and play it for our friends. And then you're like, they're excited. Are you guys going to play that song this weekend at your show? Yes. Then you go to that show, you start getting, you build it up, and then, all right, now what's the next thing? The biggest kind of moment, though, I think for me, if I had to pick a moment, is when we wrote Fireproof.
Mm.
It was such an emotional day. I got married in May of 2001. And while I was driving, just disclaimer, don't do this. But while I was driving, I was coming back from a honeymoon with my wife, and I'm a guy that, like, when my mind kind of goes numb into, like, I wrote a lot of lyrics when I was mowing the yard. When I go out and do something where your mind shuts off, while I was driving, she was asleep, and I was just ideating. I didn't have anything to write on, so I'm like, she's asleep. I reach over into the glove box and I grab our like tag, like registration, and a pen out of her purse while I'm driving, and I just start writing down all of these ideas. And one of the words that I wrote down was fireproof, because I had just read the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and like that whole like walking through the fire, coming out, not even smelling like smoke, and it just stuck with me. And I wrote the word fireproof down. Fast forward to September 11th, 2001, and we were in Green Bay, Wisconsin on tour with Skillet, and we were supposed to play a concert that night, and we woke up that morning to the same thing that everybody else knows where they were at that day, and we're like, well, the shows are going to be canceled, right? So they canceled the shows, and we're like, well, let's go up to the church and just rehearse, because we got a record that we got to write. And so we were in the middle of writing, and I had this idea, and Noah, this was going to be the first record that he wrote with us, because he wasn't on our first record. He had this really cool little riff. It was just like this little walk-up thing, and he had just got this new pedal that he was playing with. It was like jung, 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 dun, 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 dun. And then we get up there to and that's all we had. And we get up to the youth room at this church in Green Bay, and the drummer's like, he's like, keep playing that. And he's like, do, 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 ga, doom, do, 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 ga, doom, do. He starts adding his piece. And we had 2 TVs on in the youth room, and we're just watching all of the wreckage of the day. And that's when I was like, man, that fireproof vibe probably fits into this. And so what I did is I rigged up the youth soundboard. I ran out of their outputs. I ran a stereo out into RCA plugs into a VCR on the front. And I recorded the audio onto a blank VHS cassette, because we didn't have any other way to record and demo this out. And so I had the guys just track that verse and the chorus, just like, let's get me something to write, to listen to. And then I took that back to the house, and I plugged it in the VCR with some headphones, and I just kept rewinding it and listening to it and figuring out how to make everything fit. And that's how Fireproof evolved. And when we first got it kind of done, and I told the guys, like, here's the chorus, check this out, what do you guys think? And I remember them going, that's freaking awesome, dude. That's awesome. And so we go and we demo it out. We're on tour with Skillet, and I just remember John Cooper going, dude, that song's gonna blow up. And it was just one of those moments that you just kind of, I'll never forget that, So that was probably a moment where you realize, like, hey, we went from a band that we had won a Dove Award off of our first record. It was pretty cool, but that was like John's kind of affirmation. He was an OG already at that point.
Right.
I don't even know what status he is now, but he had been around, and for him to say, man, you guys are going to blow up.
Did it feel like you finally kind of like maybe crack the code isn't the right phrase for it, but did it feel like, oh, this is how you do this. This is how you craft a song well. Like you find this catchy riff, or like had that happened yet? Again, like you guys had already a couple albums by that point, but it really feel like you zoned in on like this is how you do this music making thing.
I don't know. I think it was no different than what we had already been doing, really. Like that was our style. Like the guitar player, those guys would write 750 riffs a week. They'd just be like just noodling around and come up with stuff. And we would take like, oh, that would be a cool verse, or that riff with this piece. That's kind of where we worked together. He would just write riffs. Dude, he's a machine. Noah is a phenomenal guitar player.
I remember Michael saying that too.
Yeah. Noah is a phenomenal guitar player. Stack him up against anybody. And creatively, not just being able to play riffs, but like his riffs that he writes are phenomenal. And he would just write so many of them. And they would have the craziest names, like Dreamcatcher. Oh yeah, the Dreamcatcher riff with Tennessee. He would like geographically name where he wrote the song.
Sounds like Peyton Manning's pre-play calls.
Pre-snap count.
Yeah, and so it was like we had New York, we had Albany, we had Tennessee, Memphis. We had all these like riffs that we knew them by, and we would piece them together. And then I would kind of just sit with it, and I always felt like, let's piece it together and see what's the vibe, like what's this song trying to say, and then I would come up with a theme and then write around that theme.
That's such an interesting way of going about things, because I feel like a lot of times, you hear about like bands, kind of like going off to like their separate corners and kind of figuring out their pieces and then bringing it all together.
Yeah.
It is interesting that, they're like, here's basically like a full-fledged song. You go figure out melodies and all that stuff, and when you've got it figured out, come back to us and let's have some fun with it, right?
Yeah.
Is there a lot of
it was
changes?
hard.
Is there a lot of changes once you come back to come to the band?
Sometimes there were. I wouldn't say a lot, but sometimes there were just like those guys were so good. They were so much better than me as far as musicianship. Their talent was like so far beyond me sometimes. Here's a funny story to kind of articulate what I'm trying to say. So we recorded most of our songs with Travis Wyrick in Knoxville, Tennessee, which is also where Disciple was from. So we would see those guys all the time. Like we'd go out to eat with them, like hang out while we're go wakeboarding and out to dinner. Like we'd hang out with those guys a lot. And I remember talking with Kevin Young one time, and the guys, like Michael came up with this gnarly riff on the bass. And it was so ridiculous. I'm like, who are we, Primus? Like, how am I supposed to write to this? Like, it was in 6/8. It was like do 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 do. It was just like this flowing, moving bass line, and then the chorus was like so big and melodic and different. Like it wasn't even like a chord structure. It was just the chorus was a riff. It's like, how do you write to this? And I remember talking to Kevin. I was like, dude, maybe you should take this song if you think it's awesome, because it's so complicated. I don't even know what to write. And Kevin just says, just keep it simple, man. And so that was the song, Simply. That was like, nice. He said, just keep it simple. And I was like, okay. And so that word simple and simply just kept going through my head. And that became the "You Simply Love," like that whole, it just fell right out. Like it was like, sometimes you just have to have somebody just like push you over the edge. And so a lot of the songs were, I would overthink it. It was I way overcomplicated things, or everybody, we just had a good team and all worked together.
It's beautiful. Obviously eventually you guys get to a point where you're not, playing anymore. You kind of do this. I don't know if you guys like maybe officially broke up or if it was a hiatus or not, but after a number of years, I would imagine like life's changing, kids are coming into the picture, and job, you need full-time jobs, the whole thing, right? But you guys did just play this last year, about 6 months ago. You guys played your first show
didn't you?
in like 10 years or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I just love to hear kind of where things are now with Pillar. Like what, you guys played one show. I would imagine, if anything's going to happen, it's probably going to be way slower of a process than it was before. But yeah, I'm just curious, like kind of where you're at now with Pillar. What are maybe your goals for Pillar moving forward?
Yeah. Well, the beauty of it now is it's not a primary income or revenue
Right.
stream for any one of us. So to do it now, it's because we can, and we do it for the love of it. It gets really difficult. There was a season where I would say yes, we went into a hiatus. There were some guys that came in, Wittig and Lester kind of left, and I tried to keep it going to fulfill contracts, and it just became this like burden of obligation. It didn't feel the same anymore, and to do it now is so much different, and it was really special, this summer. I will tell you, yes, we're older. I'll be 50 this year, but there was something special about that night. So we rehearsed the day before, and it was crazy. Everybody was thinking the same thing, but nobody said it. Like our crew, us, like everybody was helped setting up. We had some friends that were hanging out, and like we all got our ears checked, and everybody's like, okay, we got everything set. Now it's time to actually play a song. Let's see what happens. And I think we played Fireproof for the first song, and we got done, and everybody was like, dang, that was awesome. Like it was like we just did it last week, and it had
Like
been
riding a bike.
it was so crazy. Now some of that is because number one, Lester and Noah are straight up pros, man. Like they do this, they're still gigging full time,
Hanging with Kelly Clarkson and doing studio work, and
they're
thing.
pros. Wittig, I mean, he practiced his butt off. He was always practicing. I was doing the best that I could. Mine was like I had to fight a Stairmaster and really get myself back into shape. I'm not in bad shape. It's different. Like being on the road and doing that is such a different type of conditioning. And it was the longest set we had ever played. We played for an hour and 45 minutes. So
Oh, damn.
on fire. They were literally on fire. By the last few songs that we did, I couldn't even hardly take a breath. It's like we had to take a break to come back and play like the encore songs just so I could go catch my breath.
Well, now you know what Joe Biden felt like during that debate.
Exactly. It was such a fun moment of like when we played that song, and then there were songs off of the One Love Revolution record that we had never played live before, because we wrote that record in like 2014. We'd never played those songs live, so doing some of those songs, that was awesome. Getting to play
that had
those
to have
songs.
been a blast.
Yeah, that was fun.
Well, hopefully.
So with that, I mean, so it sounds like it was awesome. Is it awesome enough where you're like, maybe again, or maybe like, hey, we got a couple songs still maybe left in us to write? Like, I'm just curious, like, what is that like?
What's
Maybe
next?
that doesn't exist at all. But I'm just curious, like, has it at least maybe lit that flame a little bit more, or lit that match again?
Yeah, it's so we do have some shows already scheduled for 2025. I know we have a show overseas in Germany later on in September. I know that we're on for Kingdom Bound in Albany, New York, or it's that area at the Six Flags out in New York. So we're kind of looking at this as let's not stress our families out, because we do have other roles and responsibilities, but let's do some things to keep the brand going. And it was so satisfying to hear all of the stories. Like it was so cool, man, to see some of our fans that now have kids and they got to bring their kids and introduce them to their favorite band when they were young. And that was a really, really special thing to get to see. As far as new music, man, I'll just say it. I'm the one that holds us back because it's so hard right now. I know that we have a couple of songs right now that Noah has kind of demoed out and put together. They're pretty sick. I will say this: it's like it's some old school Pillar. Like it's
Mm.
heavy as crap, and Noah being able to do his thing, and the guys are like, "Yeah, we'll go track our part, and then Rob, you go figure it out." It's like, all right. So yes, we do want to put some new music out. We did a couple Christmas songs just to see how it would go, and they're actually pretty cool. I'm pleased with how those turned out. But our future, my guess is that we'll probably have a song out at some point this year for sure.
Oh, nice.
Awesome. That's great.
I mean, it's already demoed out, man. Like I don't even know if I can find it. I'll give you the. It's called Volumes.
Oh, that's a fun
Wow.
name.
No, that's just the working title. I told you,
I
like
was gonna
Noah
say,
has these
It
crazy.
should be
names.
the final title. That's a great name.
It is a cool title, but like he's like, here, I'll put it on a Dropbox. So he sends it out and roughs it up, and here's.
Oh. Dang.
Yeah, you're right.
Pretty heavy.
That is
Noah
classic
on the
Pillar.
baritone. But it just sounds, like so now it's like everybody's getting all fired up, and now I freaking put it out there publicly, so now we have to finish it. But
That's right.
those guys are so talented, and they put that, and you can record a record now
So much differently than when you
different.
probably were.
You don't have to have a
Yes.
VCR anymore, which is
You
nice.
don't need a VCR. You don't need like the analog. I'll never forget the first record and just that sound of like when you're tracking and then they hit stop and it goes. It picks back up. Like it's changed so much and evolved so much. And both Lester and Noah are brilliant in the production world too. So they can throw a lot together pretty easy.
Yeah. Well, let's turn to a different topic slightly. So it's obvious that faith has always been a part of Pillar, and I guess I've always been kind of curious as to what your kind of like worldview is on faith.
Yeah.
I mean, you're a part of a pretty large church organization and everything like that. What does that stuff look like for you these days?
So I have been in full-time ministry now since 2010. Like that's kind of what I stepped into coming off the road. I did worship for a while and then stepped into a pastoring role at a couple different churches. And now I'm sitting in more of kind of a operational role and overseeing multiple locations of my church. And man, it's been different iterations of doing ministry, but the thing that I love about it is knowing my past, knowing where I came from and what I went through. I want to be able to be that for other people. That was something that I always enjoyed with Pillar, hearing the stories of how the music helped make an impact. I just love being able to be kind of on the front lines and getting to hear those stories and be a part of those through doing full-time ministry. And the church that I'm at, man, I love it. We have a incredible like global impact where we're doing a lot of work in Egypt and have a great relationship now with Convoy of Hope and working with them and doing some relief efforts, getting supplies into the Gaza Strip through Egypt, working directly with the Egyptian government, which nobody is able to do. And so that's been like our senior pastor went and met with like the Pope's assistant to talk to them about getting things through the Vatican and working with them to get things into the Gaza Strip to bring relief to both sides of the conflict. And so I love being a part of something that it really is a global impact, but it's not. There's a purity to the ministry that's here that's very simple and effective, and And I love being a part of that. As far as like for me, man, my faith has been all over the place. This year specifically has been probably one of the most challenging years of my life. My father last January in 2024 took his own life, and that was tough. We had a little bit of strain in our relationship, and I feel like it's given me a new empathy and understanding for other men that are hurting. So I love being able to help other men that are going through stuff, because I think we all have something from our earthly father that is kind of we carry that wound differently. Been through like Wild at Heart boot camps, and I love working with other men and trying to just to help them navigate it, because man, that's one of the things about men that I think we struggle with the most, is thinking that we got to figure it out on our own, that we don't need to ask nobody for help. It's a sign of weakness if we're asking for help. And I don't know the theology behind this. This is just kind of how I read it, but somebody can pick it apart. The Bible talks about the armor of God, the helmet, the shield, and the breastplate, and the belt, and the sword, and the shoes. Like your back is exposed, and I think that's for a reason. I think that's for us to figure out who we're going to invite into our lives to watch our back, and whose back can we watch, because I think it's important to have a band of brothers. Some guys in your life that I've heard people say, "Who's your 3 a.m. friend?" We need those.
Love
yeah, I definitely agree with that part for sure.
Sort of along your faith, and this is a little bit of a funny story about Pillar. Maybe it wasn't so funny for you in the moment, but I'm sure you know where I'm going with this. But there was a show called the Ollie G Show back in the day, and Pillar got spoofed in this. Now, maybe you feel a little bit better because of the fact that like this guy has duped a lot of people, not just Pillar.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like, do you have like how do you look back on that experience where you get this guy that is pretending to be this like very flaming gay person, and he's trying to catch you off guard or whatever. But yeah, I'm just curious, like, how do you look back to that memory? Like, that's got to be, at this point, it's got to be just silly, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Today, 100%. Very silly. That day, it was funny because it's not abnormal for media to come into a Christian, so it was part of that traveling festival. It was called Festival Con Dios. And the whole festival traveled. It was a tour. It was like 9 bands, and we set up in mall parking lots. Had the big like Transformer stage opens up, and had these inflatable gates that everybody walked in. And there were multiple shows where people would come in and they would ask to use people's bus to interview. And I think they asked us if they could use our bus, and we were like, no, because I remember I had to work on our generator. So I was like the guy that like fixed everything, and our generator was down. So I was not in a great mood that day. Anyway, like before I went on stage, like I had to wear long sleeves because my arms were covered in grease. Like I couldn't wear what I normally wore. I was like, I washed my hands. Otherwise, I looked like a homeless person that just soiled to death. So I was already not in a good mood. And they're like, hey, we need you to come do this interview with this guy. He's wanting to talk about, he's a little eccentric. And I remember kind of describing it as like, I'm not talking to anybody today. And Wittig is like, I'll do it. Number one, I'm so glad that I had the intuition and know myself enough to know, because I would have not had a good interaction with him. Like it wouldn't have gone well. It would have been, I would have been on the thing, like pushing him or like ripping the mic out of his hand, or I would have had a horrible reaction because I was not in a good state of mind. And I knew that enough about myself that like, you can't go do interviews if you're not in the right state of mind. And so Wittig did it. And then afterwards, he was like, dude, you ought to be glad that you didn't go do it. This dude was so weird. He's like, he was wearing fishnet shirts, like nipples were hanging out, asking us a question like, why the cross? Why not the rainbow? The rainbow's so beautiful. I was like, what? I was like, who is this? And man, it was like maybe a year later when that Ali G show came out. And I think we were maybe at a hotel or something. And somebody goes, like, isn't that the guy that was at the festival interviewing everybody? And then come to find out on his like DVD, Wittig was on the bloopers and like that's the guy. So now it's hilarious. That day was though everybody was so up in arms about this guy interviewing. They were like stopping artists before they would go in there, like, "Hey, just be ready because he's asking some really, really weird questions." And I don't think he really got the reactions that he was wanting.
Right, right.
Because none of them,
which is probably why it didn't make like the final cut.
It didn't because everybody was getting warned before they went in. Like, hey, be loving. He's asking some really bizarre questions. Just be patient with him. And probably didn't get I would have given him the exact reaction that he wanted.
That's exactly what Kalel said too.
And so I'm glad that I didn't go.
That's awesome. You said that there were other artists that got interviewed by him. Who were some of those other artists? Because yours, like the Pillar one, was the only one that made the blooper, right?
I think so. To my recollection, it was. Let's see. I think Jeremy Camp would have probably been on that tour.
Would have been
because he had just started. Like
Yeah.
he was meeting Addie on that tour. Like he and his wife, they were like in catering. So I remember he was on that tour. I don't remember some of the openers that were there. He probably was one that got interviewed. He was probably so nice about it too.
I'm sure he was.
He's really like,
Nice
what in
dude.
the world?
Probably just
He
stroking.
still
his
probably
little-
has no idea what happened.
stroking his little soul patch.
Yeah, he's such a gentle guy. Like the biggest biceps and so nice and gentle.
Well, speaking of, if you had to have someone defend you, would it be Lesser or would it be Kalel? Because they both got some pythons, if you know what I mean.
They do, man. I feel like Lester would be like unassuming. Like, you know what I mean? Because he's so quiet, but he might have some like nunchuck skills with the drumsticks and stuff. So I don't know, man. I say neither one of them would be a bad choice.
At least, like you're in a band where two of your members are, could be bodyguards too. You don't have to hire that out.
But I was telling this, like, so since then I'm a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. I've competed and all my kids wrestle. So I'm around like combat sports all the time. So they would be asking me to protect them.
Beautiful. All right. Well, Rob, you ready for your top 5 most influential albums?
All right. Top 5.
So in any order, it could be, chronological order. If you actually have like a ranking system to it, that's great. But yeah, what are these 5 albums that have influenced you?
Okay. So maybe chronological. I'll kind of walk through my life of like those pinnacle moments. Purple Rain.
Very nice.
Purple Rain, number 1. I remember the year that record came out, and me and my buddies were in my mom's basement, and we had cut up all of these cups full of confetti, and at midnight we played Let's Go Crazy, and we got out some like brooms and like baseball bats, and we stood up on the coffee table, and we're like, "Dearly beloved, we're gathered here today to get through this thing called life." And it kicked in. We're like, "Happy New Year!" And we throw the confetti everywhere. And my mom was just like, "You're cleaning all this up." I loved that record, man. And we've done some. We did Let's Go Crazy. Pillar covered it
Nice.
during one of our tours. We threw it in there.
Oh man, that'd be amazing to see.
Let's see. From there, I'm gonna go 311, the Blue record. That was just. It was such a great record, and like I said, it was because it was from guys like from our neck of the woods. That was a huge record. Johnny Cash, American 4.
Yes.
the American albums are
That's
so
one of
good.
Mason and I's favorites as well.
So that record, my oldest son's middle name is Cash, and it was really, I had just read his. I listened to that record all the time, like every day. I was listening to it. Any flight we were on, it's like that was my go-to, and I read his book, the last book that he wrote. What's crazy is I started reading it in San Francisco in the Fillmore Theater green room where he started writing it.
Wow.
And I didn't know it until I started reading the book. And he like notes that he was writing the book in the very room that I was reading.
And you're looking around
I was like, this is freaking crazy. That was awesome. So I gotta go with that. I don't know if some of them probably aren't super appropriate.
That's okay.
Yeah, you don't have to be appropriate.
Well, my kids knowing what I was listening to.
It's good that they know the real you.
The next one for sure is Foo Fighters' Color and Shape.
Oh, another great one.
So, and a kind of a cool story to go along with it. So when I was in the Army, I was out in the Virginia Beach area, and I was housed with like Army and Navy. So I had some friends that were in the Navy, and one of the guys was like, dude, Foo Fighters is playing. And I knew of them. They were just that record had just come out. So it wasn't like, it was big, but it wasn't what it is today. Right. And they were playing with Stone Temple Pilots without the singer. It was when he was
Scott Weiland.
Yeah. Scott was not singing. They had a fill in while he was out for a bit. But they opened for him, and we're like, we're going to go to this concert. So we, bunch of military dudes, jump in, drive a couple hours, go to this concert at Old Dominion University.
Nice.
And my buddy was wearing a hat. He had a hat like this. Mine's a homemade one, Pillar brand, We Ride. Well, his said Chaka, Chaka. And if you remember on the Smells Like Teen Spirit music video, on Dave Grohl's kick drum, it said Chaka. Well, that was a known graffiti artist. Excuse me. It was a known graffiti artist from the West Coast that used to tag everything Chaka. So the thing was, it's like his drums got tagged by the graffiti artist. So he was giving a nod to this guy from the West Coast. Well, my buddy had a hat that said Chaka, and so we're out there, kind of out in the mosh pit, and my buddy just loses his mind. He's like wrapped up in the moment. He's like, he takes his hat off and he throws it on the stage. And security comes over and grabs me and starts dragging me out for throwing something on stage. And I was like, I'm not going to sell my buddy out. So I didn't know you. I was like, it was him. I didn't sell him out. I was like, I didn't throw anything. They're dragging me out. Dave Grohl stops the show and says,
Wow.
He's like, whoa. He's like, security. He's like, stop. He's like, don't kick those guys out. And he walks over and he picks up the hat and he brushes it off. He turns around and he sets it on his amp. And they were just about done anyway. Like it was on, like they were done. And he turns around and he said, hey, he goes, don't kick those guys out. He goes, they just gave us a present. He's like, it's all good. We're good. He's like, you know what? He goes, this one's for you guys. And they're like, and they played Monkey Wrench. And we're like, yes, this is the only song I know. And so I just became like huge Foo Fighter fans after that. And that record, probably, I wore that one out. I don't know how many of that CD I bought.
Yeah, that's an incredible one.
Yeah. And then, I don't know, man, number 5.
I think you got one more.
Yeah. Gosh. That's tough. Okay. I'm going to have to say most influential Seven Dust Seasons.
Oh,
Nice.
some Seven Dust.
Interesting.
That record came out as we were writing for our Where Do We Go From Here record. And that's probably one of the records that I listen to nonstop. Like it was, I had one for my car and it just stayed in there. I had one that I took with me on the road so I could listen to it. That record was awesome. There's some other ones that I think that, would fall in, like Incubus had some great, their record was pretty influential, but I gotta throw the Seven Dust in there because I wore that thing out, and it really
Good
did.
call.
It pushed me. I love LeJean. Actually, one of the greatest compliments I ever got was from LeJean, standing on the side of the stage, telling me I was a great front man. I was like, best compliment I ever got because I think he's one of the
Dang.
best front men in hard rock music.
Yeah, tons of charisma for sure.
That's an incredible
Yeah,
list.
pretty eclectic, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very.
You can hear a little bit of it in your vocals and Pillar's music, but you definitely I can kind of start piecing together. I'm like, oh, this kind of
Yeah,
makes sense.
it's like we got, what did I say? Prince, Johnny Cash, 311,
311.
Foo Fighters, and Seven Dust. So
It's a great list.
Great
Great
mix.
list. Love it. Well, Rob, what do you want to plug? Yeah, literally anything. It sounds like maybe a few Pillar shows this year, maybe a song. Yeah, what do you want to plug?
yeah, for sure the shows, man. I guess this my time to like plug something,
Yeah,
anything.
You can plug
anything.
a real plug first if you want.
Oh, okay. Well, definitely if you're in the New York area, come out to Kingdom Bound. They have been so gracious to bring us back out after kind of seeing the excitement that we had at a live festival and the buzz that came from that. They reached out and wanted to bring us out. And so if you're out in that area, man, we need all the old school Pillar fans to show up and show them how to do it, man, because these kids don't know how to rock anymore, man. We would play these festivals and they're all out. They're so used to TikTok, they just stand there and pull their phones out. Like, just put your phone down and let's freaking sweat, bro. Like, let's show them how to do it. Yeah, so Kingdom Bound is coming up. I believe that's in August. You can follow any of our socials. It's on our webpage, pillarmusic.com. We'll have all of our lists. And we also, man, I also just want to push the fact that we released a vinyl record, which is super cool to me because that's come full circle back to when I was a kid, pulling out the old Earth, Wind, and Fire records
Heck
and
yeah.
listening to them at my mom's house. So uh, we got some packages that we put together for some vinyl records as well.
Awesome.
Love it. Love it.
Uh,
Anything else you'd like to plug?
One more thing before
Oh, go
before
ahead.
you plug anything else. Is there any way that someone could maybe donate some money to the food, like the food and relief effort that you were discussing earlier with the Gaza?
So I'll just say there's currently through our church, no, because we don't have any designated giving right now that's opened up to be able to give directly to that. So I don't want to falsely promote that you could give to our church and it would be
Sure.
used for that because we don't have the
Right.
designated giving open. But Convoy of Hope is one of the most amazing organizations within our country that does both domestic and global relief and restoration efforts. So they're still on the ground right now, helping in North Carolina, all of the devastation out there. They don't just show up with water in a truck. Like, they show up, they set up, they bring relief, and they stick around through the restoration process. But they also have an amazing global effort. And so if you're looking for an organization that you want to give to or even volunteer with wherever you are, they're always looking for volunteers. Convoy of Hope is a phenomenal organization.
Good to know.
Love that.
Awesome.
We'll make sure that we get that all linked up.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
Awesome.
Anything
with
else
all
you'd
that
like
said-
to plug?
Anything else to plug? So, yeah, back in the day, I said I was in the Army. And part of my, the end of my time in the Army, I was kind of tasked with being recruiter. Like, hey, if you're going to be out here, why don't you go out and plug the Army and try to recruit at some of your shows? And so we had set up this thing to where I was supposed to go jump out of an airplane with the Black Knights, which is the Army's like their paratrooper team, like whatever, their skydiving team. And so they were set for me to go out and do that. And so it didn't work out then because we had the touring and all of that. I couldn't get, so I'm going to go jump out of the plane with the freaking Black Knights. And I'm not really sure when yet, but I'm going to go jump out of a plane with the Black Knights, skydiving.
So they kind of gave you like a rain check or something?
Yeah. Eternal rain check. It's like, hey, now's your time.
You should do it into a show at maybe at the New York Festival.
Yeah, that would be awesome. That would be one of the greatest rock and roll entrances of all time if you just freaking dropped in onto the stage.
If you want Pillar to get big on TikTok, that's how you do it.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah.
Actually, a lifelong goal of mine has been to skydive, so that sounds so much fun.
There you go.
You should do it.
Love it.
You should do it.
Love it. Well, Rob, thank you so much for chatting more about Pillar. It's really an honor that you even would respond to us on Instagram. So thanks so much for chatting more about Pillar, and hopefully things keep going well with the church, and we're excited for whatever new could come out of Pillar, whether it's shows or new music. We're excited for it. So thank you so much for chatting all about it.
That's awesome. Well, I thank you very much. You guys are great, and it's been a pleasure getting to walk down memory lane with you guys.
Love it. And I didn't even wear my fishnet.
Yeah,